Hey, everyone. This is Damian, one of the co-hosts of the Never Stay Dead podcast. This time around, it is a bonus episode. And by bonus, we mean it's just an extra bit of conversation. This is what was recorded, not entirely on purpose, after we finished recording our last episode, where Matt and I were talking about Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. And looking back on it, I thought this might be interesting to some people. So if you'd like to hear us kind of ramble around a number of subjects, particularly including the Wonder Woman movie and the current state of the comic book publishing market and what's going on with DC and how that might affect the market and a bunch of other subjects, feel free to listen in. Otherwise, we'll be back soon with our next episode. I pulled out a beer I've never had before. It was sweating. It's by Mamba, it's called Mamba, and it's by Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh Brewing. I just had to buy it because Gilgamesh being the first written hero by human beings in history.
Well, I'm drinking the rosé from Dark Horse in honor of our comic tonight.
A rosé?
Somehow. Yeah, it's a wine in a can.
Ooh, classy days.
So classy.
Oh wow, this Gilgamesh is actually very good.
I bet I'd rather be drinking that, but I'm enjoying the wine.
It's from Salem, Oregon. Proudly brewed in Salem, Oregon. Oh yeah, this is good. I'm going to have to get this again.
Surprised it's not the Bitches Brew or something at that point.
Because it's in Salem, Oregon, yeah. If it was Salem, Massachusetts. Actually, you know what? On a second sip, it seems too sweet. Do you ever have that happen? The first sip, it seems really good.
Your palate's adjusting, so sometimes it takes 3 to 5 sips to kind of normalize. And it could be that you hit different parts of your tongue, too, so...
I didn't read the description. Brewed with black tea and tangerine peel. So
wow.
I think I'm not liking that tangerine peel so much.
That's hippy-dippy.
There's a million beers out there. People are trying they're throwing everything up at the wall and seeing how it works in their beer.
I just had a sour IPA, and it's too much.
Yeah.
I'm finding I just like Belgians.
I like IPAs, but they have to be good. And now there's so many IPAs out there, and a lot of them aren't good. They're just they're just going insane with IPAs.
They're just throwing random hops and not really caring. Yeah. But yeah, good quality IPA, sure.
Those, like here in Portland, there was, I assume it will be back in business someday, a bar that served nothing but sours. I think lot they made themselves. And I can't drink too many of those, but 1 or 2 is nice.
That's fair, and there's certain sours that hit a nice note, and there's some that are, like, too much.
Yeah. They start tasting like a vinegary wine or something.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what was the name of our podcast? Never Say Something Good About Matt? Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that's right. I think we'd get more clicks.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Never Stay Dead. I am Damian, and I am here with my good buddy Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hello, Internet.
So next time we're going to go way out of my comfort zone. So your choice.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that we're going to move away from Marvel Comics for a little while. Because while you're a Marvel zombie, I'm not supposed to do it.
It's the first 3 volumes of Death Note.
Yeah, so I went ahead and bought the first 3 volumes of Death Note. They were on sale.
And I've had them for years.
And have you read the entire series?
I did in a period of a month or something. It was... We'll talk about it when we get there, but yeah, it's certainly one of the more famous manga series. That was something I wanted to do. I wanted to
Right. I've definitely heard about it. I've heard people describe the plot for years, and I know there's a very popular anime for it, and was there a movie made in the United States about it, or just talk about it?
There is an American movie called Death Note that has elements of the story, but is ultimately very different and very short comparatively. I got a kick out of it.
Right. And people were upset that it was whitewashed, so to speak, or something.
Well, it was the American version, was taking place in America. I don't think that counts as whitewashing. The character was intentionally that. But there is also some live action Death Note movies that were made in Japan, a lot more the anime than the manga for the slate. The manga and the anime are actually pretty tight. But yeah, it was done by a production company that if something veers one way, it veers more off the anime, and it's done it for Rurouni Kenshin, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Fullmetal Alchemist, a lot of the big ones. And when I was toying around, I wanted to do a manga and reads a bit of a more famous manga with you, and I was trying to pick one, and when I narrowed it down, I was kind of between Death Note and Fullmetal Alchemist, and I just felt like Death Note is something that is unlike anything we've read for the show before, whereas Fullmetal Alchemist is great and different enough. I just felt like there's something that would be more generative to talk about with Death Note.
Now, there's a good chance I won't like it, so I hope you won't be offended when that happens.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be your favorite thing ever, but I think you're going to find yourself intrigued.
Okay. Well, anyway, so when we come back to life again, we will talk Death Note, which is, good life and death. Death Note fits right in.
But people stay dead in this one.
You can enjoy me struggling to read manga. That may be entertaining to some people.
You should be able to set it so you can just read it the way you normally read stuff, I think.
Really? Oh, it's when I tapped on it, it starts off saying, oops.
Oh, you have to go. Well, it's digital, so it's not going to be as much of a thing anyways. Page by page.
Where did that go? When I first opened it up, it gave me a little note saying this is going to be in manga style. So you swipe the other way and you read the things the other way.
And you read it
right to left.
Right to left. Yeah, I guess they can't really do that with the page. And
I've read other manga, but I can handle the left to right or the right to left thing. But I just haven't yet found any manga I liked.
Okay. Well, at the very least, you're reading something that is one of the big ones. So at least you're getting a bit of a comic breath from it.
So I wanted, since we were talking about the X-Men, did you by any chance come across, it just arrived in Marvel Unlimited, this redrawing of giant-size X-Men?
I thought it was just a culmination of giant size X-Men with the classic X-Men #1 printing with the extra pages.
No, it is page for page, word balloon for word balloon, Len Wein's script, but every page is drawn by a different modern day artist.
Oh my god, that sounds kind of
weird.
Painful, honestly.
It's weird. At first I thought, this is really exciting, like page 1 by Alex Ross, page 2 by Kevin Nolan, page 3 by Chris Samney. You've got Marguerite Sauvage, Bernard Chang, Aaron Kuder, Takeshi Maezawa.
There's so much people.
Phil Noto.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to pick out interesting names here. Mike Del Mundo, Pepe Larraz. Anyway.
Sean Reyes do any of them?
No Sean Reyes.
Okay.
They didn't get him to do the chibi page. So it's kind of a surreal thing for a comic that, is fairly familiar to us to just see it drawn by someone else. But it also, after a while, gets tiresome, the endlessly changing styles.
I mean, if they got 1 or 2 artists, it might be fun. But if it's a different artist every page, that's just going to suck.
But it's interesting that they tried that. I mean, that would have been the last thing I would ever thought of to...
It was 2 issues, right?
No, it's just the first double-sized issue.
Oh, I thought they split it because there's some giant size X-Men thing that was 2 issues recently.
Well, maybe that's something else, or maybe for the digital version they put it all in one. Or maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was... It's 43 pages long.
All right.
Anyhow, interesting thing, and it's X-Men related. Completely not X-Men related. I broke down and got HBO Max and watched Wonder Woman. Have you watched it? Because I saw you talking on Twitter with people about it.
Yeah, I watched it. I enjoyed it, apparently more than most people, but I feel like my expectations were different. Well, so I have one friend who's more of a superhero person by movie than by comic, though he's just started buying comics now. Just been some bizarre conversations. But he didn't like it because one of his main complaints was that he didn't feel that it played into the larger DC universe or anything. And I was like, I couldn't care less about that.
Right. Well, neither did the first Wonder Woman movie, in a sense. They're both historic movies before Superman and Batman came along in terms of the DC movie timeline.
I've never seen Batman versus Superman, so I don't even know parts of it.
I mean, I think those take place in the 2000s or 2010s.
It sounds right, yeah. Current to when they were
She's
made.
Been around all this time, and that's why people don't call her Wonder Woman in the movie, I think, because she hasn't become a public figure yet.
Right.
She's just the mysterious woman who saved people.
Yeah. And it was clearly made to be like an 80s movie, which explains away some of the more goofy parts that people are complaining about. Though, the Steve Trevor reanimated into someone's body versus just appearing is a complaint that I take full-heartedly and think, yeah, why did they do that? That's weird.
I don't know. I mean, it definitely, here I was picking on all the details in the Wolverine Kitty Pryde book that didn't quite connect for me. But in the Wonder Woman movie, I kind of accepted all the things that if you got too logical about it, didn't make sense. But it was kind of neat having him take over someone else's life. And only she saw him as Steve Trevor. I thought that was an interesting touch.
Yeah, it's just the implications of some of it's a little...
Right.
Gross.
It is a little gross. But and here's the funny thing, because I've lived through the 80s as an adult, or as a college student and then an adult. I thought the movie didn't go for the 80s goofiness enough. There should have been more songs like Cyndi Lauper type songs, or Devo, or I Think I'm Turning Japanese, or that kind of goofy music. And more goofy clothes. There was a few bits of goofy clothes, or what we now view as goofy
clothes.
There's a whole
sequence just about that. That was enough. But I see what you're saying. Like, when I say an 80s movie, I mean like a movie made in the 80s, not like a movie all about the 80s.
I just would have been happy if they really overdid it. But obviously that wouldn't have, if other people are complaining about the amount that they already did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it had a slower pace to it, which was like an 80s movie too. Movies, especially action movies, have become super fast paced.
Which might have been actually part of the reason I was a little more sweet on it than, in retrospect, maybe I felt like I should be. Because I heard some sound complaints about the movie, but it just didn't bother me when I was watching. And the other part of it is, like, when I hear the sound complaints, it's people taking it very seriously. And I'm like... So Wonder Woman movie, and like the emotion of it and the heart of it is actually more important than pretty much any other aspect. And some of the complaints I heard about how Wonder Woman dealt with things, it was kind of like, well, it's Wonder Woman. Like she's more about appealing to people's better halves than punching someone.
Yeah. Right. It's a little bit cheesy, but that's how she's supposed to be. She's the character who would like to use love and not fists, but can use fists when she has to.
And clearly it's an 80s Trump more so than Max Lord to say some things about.
Yeah, it's not at all Max Lord, but I've heard people complaining that it was a really bad Trump. But I thought it was an 80s type, because another thing you need to remember about the 80s is that was the greed is good era. That was Ronald Reagan and everybody transforming, taking the new aginess of the 70s and making new age money. You know what I'm saying? You put the crystals under your bed to get rich, not to get enlightenment or something. So I thought he was perfect as an 80s character, the way they did him.
It's 80s Trump.
No, I didn't even... I know everyone says he's like... I think he's more like if he were a modern day guy, I'm not even sure who he would be. But I think he was definitely an 80s type. And that's sort of the era where you first... Because cable TV finally became big. You got, people, hucksters on TV and Tony Robbins. He was more like Tony Robbins or someone like that.
Oh, that's a little close for me. Yeah, fair enough.
Do you know someone who got too into Tony Robbins?
I worked for a company that was partially built on his fame being connected to it. So, it was uncomfortable, especially because when I was working there, the rape allegations came out, which was fun.
I didn't know about that, but I'm not surprised. I mean, he was a cult leader of sorts.
Yeah.
And they're always about getting sex, no matter what. Cult leaders, that is. Well, you'll have to tell me more about that experience someday.
That's about the sum total of it. I actually brought it up when the news was breaking. I was like, do we have to address this somehow, or what do we do about it? Oh, we're just not going to worry about it. We have several pages touting Tony Robbins, and I was basically saying we should maybe take some stuff down and distance ourselves, and they weren't willing to do that because the traffic we got from it was too much.
He was the moneymaker.
Yeah.
But there were, Tony Robbins is just the one we can still remember, but there were all kinds of hucksters like that who, found you could get lots of time on TV and infomercials really cheaply, and they would try to rip people off. And I think maybe that's why a lot of people are upset about it, because they're looking at it as a Trump metaphor, and maybe it's not. Or it's not for me.
Well, the Trump metaphor was there, especially when he's doing that with that hair, standing in front of the presidential seal, promising people things that are untrue. Like, it was...
Yeah, I guess so.
Definitely.
I think what I liked it most was the whole wish concept and the way that was played out. I thought that was pretty brilliant. I think that has nothing to do with Max Lord that I know of.
That's fair.
But as their own creation in the movie, I thought that was really good. Do you mind me going on about it? Because I have no one to talk about it with.
No, that's fine.
And I really liked most of the actors, except maybe Kristen Wiig. I don't think she was right for that role.
Oh, it was a weird role.
I thought the guy who played Lord did a really good job. Sorry, what did you say? You liked her, Kristen Wiig?
She seemed fine for most of it. I feel like the cheetah part was a little odd.
And anyway, yeah, I actually thought it was a cool movie. I think there was something the way it was edited, or I'm not real movie savvy, but I felt like something like editing, what the rhythm of it was a little off or something, and that made it feel a little more boring than it really was.
It was quieter. It was edited a little differently to have some longer pauses, some longer holds on shots and stuff like that, a la an 80s movie. Also is actually shot on film as opposed to like a digital camera now.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Something of it. So there's some...
When I was listening to this podcast of these people who decided to do a 2-hour podcast on how much they hated the movie. But they had one kind of valid thing, or something they were complaining about something else maybe that made me think of it. But even though it was kind of a slow movie, it forgot to slow down on certain important points. Like the fact that Max Lord actually had researched this magic wish granting thing in advance and knew all about it. That came out too late. We should have known more about that. But yeah, I don't understand all the hate of the movie.
If you're paying attention to the movie, it's pretty obvious because the mall heist thing, which a lot of people complained about, which is bonkers because that was one of the most fun scenes of the movie. We know Max Lord was looking for this item and knew about it beforehand because of the way that's handled in the aftermath of it. We see him and how he reacts to that.
See, I didn't put it together. It took me till much later in the movie to put together that, oh, Max Lord knew all about this all along. It wasn't just chance that he happened to grab this wish-giving device. I'll have to rewatch it.
It's presented in the first act if you're paying attention. I mean, it is somewhat subtle, but I mean, it's there. And that's the thing is I've heard a lot of complaints about this movie by people, and I don't take them or accept them because I just, like, I had someone say, like, well, why are they even in the Middle East? And I was like, well, because they're tracking down Max Lord, and that's where he was, and they knew that, and so they flew there. And then they're like, well, why are they in the invisible jet? Why did the jet need to be invisible? Because they were being fired on, and so they needed to get away, and that was the way that they dealt with it, which was a cute way to show Wonder Woman having the invisible jet, and then also deal with her flying later, and showing the significance of that was tying to her pilot boyfriend.
And it was cool to show, someone from World War I would have no idea what radar is, or it all fit together nicely.
The one criticism that really stuck with me that I thought was kind of funny, but actually kind of made me like the movie a little bit more, was when they go to the Middle East, they find Max Lord by just seeing him on the road.
There was a lot of silliness in the movie, but
that felt 80s movie to me, like just some like weird happy coincidence to just move the plot along, because she's not a detective or anything. Like it
was a small country.
Yeah, there's 2 roads.
Yeah, I mean, it had a certain, it's like a James Bond movie with these just sort of silly things that you accept, I think. Anyway, I enjoyed watching it quite a bit, and I've kind of stopped watching superhero movies for the most part, so kind of went ahead and watched it because I like Gal Gadot. That was my original impetus. But I think in some ways it was a more clever superhero movie than the first one. The first one was kind of a cool World War I movie, or was it World War II? Yeah. It was World War I, wasn't it?
It's World War I, the Great War.
And I thought I would hate it because they were bringing back Steve Trevor after they killed him, and that was a big cheat, even though I'm on the Never Stay Dead podcast. But then when the way they handled it with the wishing thing, I like that. If they bring him back for a third movie, I'll have a problem.
Yeah, I don't think they will. The reason and the impetus they brought him back kind of solidifies the idea that they won't again, I believe.
And it gave some poignancy to actually losing someone, to magically bring them back and then lose them again.
Well, not even just lose them, like willingly give that up.
Give them up to save the world, yeah. And that actor who plays Steve Trevor is the only one who's ever made me like Steve Trevor in my entire comic book reading history. Steve Trevor has been one of the worst characters in comics, usually.
That's fair. I'm trying to think. The only superhero movie I'd say you totally need to watch is Into the Spider-Verse.
I have totally watched it. We made a podcast about watching it. Yes.
Did we? We do too many, apparently. I can't remember them all.
I went to the movie theater and saw it. It might have been on your recommendation or just hearing all the buzz. And then I bought the DVD. And then I realized all the streaming services I get have it on it anyway. But
that's okay, though, because you got a DVD, not a Blu-ray?
I think it was one that had the DVD and Blu-ray and digital code in it, because it didn't cost much more than...
Well, sure. Just the Blu-ray actually displays a bit better than streaming for that movie in particular.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll cancel HBO Max right away or watch more on there. I haven't decided.
There's South Park.
I know that's all about Colorado, so I should like it, right?
Oh, no. It's a taste. Yeah, there's some stuff on there, but yeah. You watch the West Wing special to try to convince you to vote, or the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion. That'll be big for you, I'm sure.
Well, you know what they have that I found I couldn't get anywhere else, which is ridiculous, is if you've heard of them, the Thin Man movies from the Depression.
Huh. Okay, I haven't.
I had this urge to watch the Thin Man movies, and I went on my Amazon Prime, which is my interface to the streaming world, and the only way I could watch the Thin Man was to get HBO Max. So I thought, well, I wanted to watch Wonder Woman anyway, so those two movies are what made me get HBO Max.
The thing my wife and I loved on HBO was the Harley Quinn show.
Oh, you know what? I watched the first minute of it, which had like people's flesh melting off their bodies and her saying fuck about 8 times. And I was like, oh, I was going to watch this with Beatrix. I guess not.
No.
And that was on the DC app before she moved to HBO Max. And every time we'd open up the DC app, the first thing they would show is this cute cartoon of, cartoony still of Harley Quinn. And she kept saying, well, can we watch that? So my being upset at them for promoting it right in front of my child's face and me having to say no. And on the app, it did not say this is, hard R.
18 plus. Yeah.
You would have had to go 3 or 4 pages in on the information about it to find out it was rated mature. So I was just really pissed about that. Oh, yeah. So I didn't watch it. So have you and your wife been enjoying it?
Oh yeah, we watched the whole thing. We loved it. We laughed our heads off. But that is a hard R for almost every reason you could give something an R. Like, wow, it's great.
But it is cruel when you make these things look like kids' shows.
Yeah, it got my wife at first too, because she's like, oh, because we do watch like Young Justice or the old Justice League cartoon or stuff like that sometimes. Sometimes to break up her constant want to watch crime procedurals. It was really funny that first minute, like you saw, where it was just cursing and blood and heads exploding just all over the place. She was like, that's not what I was expecting. And I was just laughing my head off because I knew enough to know. I knew it was an adult cartoon, if you will, but I was expecting more like Archer level, I guess, or Venture Brothers. And it is way above that for an R level. It's delightful.
It's bizarre on this more public-facing venue that DC goes that hard R when they're so conservative in other places.
Are they?
Yeah, and like their new owners, their new masters pretty much canceled most of the Black Label line after the Bat Penis showed up. They were so upset.
Oh, well.
And I think in general, they've been forcing the comics to tone down even further.
Have they?
Yeah, in the past year or two since AT&T bought them.
I thought they just canceled most of the comics in the last year.
But I have a lot of because I almost watched that without pre-screening it with Beatrix. So I have a lot of anger about that kind of thing.
Well, that'll learn you. No, I understand where you're coming from. Like, if you don't know, you don't know. They didn't tell you that. It's...
Hopefully Dean won't mind gore, but I've had many experiences where I feel very guilty for exposing Beatrix to stuff that really upsets her. Starting with, sadly, with Star Wars. She'll never watch Star Wars now because we watched it with her when she was too young, and she was so upset in the cantina scene where they cut off someone's hand that she pretty much barfed at the thought of Star Wars.
Oh, well, there you go.
Speaking of, Wolverine and Belasco abusing young girls, I did it too by making them watch Star Wars.
I'm curious what you think about, with all the DC cancellations and everything, how that's going to affect the market overall. Because I'm kind of wondering, like, is DC going to kind of take like a third string going forward now? Because they just don't have the books to be the big two anymore?
It's possible. It looks like the new masters, as they've developed they fired everybody and they hired new people. It looks like they don't care at all about the direct market. And so they're going to, they already have greatly lessened the number of comics they're putting out in the direct market. And it looks like they're going to focus on higher priced anthology comics, kind of, or not anthologies, but, they're going to charge, it looks like they're going to charge $5 or $6 per comic and put in a little backup. That's what it looks like is going to happen after the Future State. And some of the Future State issues are going to be like $8 a piece and stuff. So I think they're going to take a, it's not the same as Marvel, because Marvel oversaturates But they're going to look at the direct market as just a little, squeeze a little bit of money out of it, but mostly focus on book publishing. That's my impression.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see if there's some DC that I'm willing to pick up a little bit more now, especially because it's more focused.
I assume DC is gonna get worse this year. It's already kind of been going downhill in 2020. What I'm hoping is, after a year or two, whoever's in charge will get moved on somewhere else, and they'll get someone who understands the direct market again. Because they might eventually look at their books and say, hey, wait a minute, we actually were making some money here. Why did we give up on this? It's kind of like when you're at a company where marketing people say, hey, the trends are this way, so let's go that way. And you follow the trends, and then later you backtrack when you realize, we didn't get that trend quite right. Because they're also they're doubling down. They're doing way more digital originals. And I'm thinking they'll find the digital originals are not as successful as they think without. I personally think the direct market's still kind of the backbone where you can make a certain amount of money, which then allows you to workshop things that might become successful in the book market and stuff.
I hear you, though. I mean, I guess to play devil's advocate to that, I do believe if you're going to do a new, Our Man series, making it digital first and kind of getting a play for that and then releasing a full trade might make more sense because you can get a sense of how popular it's going to be, but also you don't have to worry about the whole publishing side of it for a book that's probably not going to crack the top 200 and is more of a building moment.
Possible that could be true, and I used to think it was, but it just doesn't seem like digital. I don't think that the comicsology market, the comicsology model is going to sell that much digital. My daughter reads a ton of that Korean company Webtoons, where everything is completely designed to be scrolled.
Right.
And it comes out weekly, and it allows for at the end of every episode, there's comments from the readers and answers from the creator. And my daughter loves reading those. It's kind of like commenting on YouTube and stuff.
The letters page.
So I think the idea of comicsology, where it's like a digital comic book store, you just go and buy an issue. I don't think that, I think that has a draw for people who already are kind of traditional comic book readers, and it's not really drawing in new people, but I could be wrong.
I think it's a slightly different market. I think there's some questions about digital sales, but I feel like if there's any argument for a digital first sort of thing, it's kind of the C-stringer DC books kind of a deal where there's going to be some interest. Those people in that market might do it, but not having to worry about publishing and letting it make the money it's going to make could make more sense, but I don't have any numbers or data to...
Yeah, the last time I ever heard data, that basically the rule of thumb was that digital sold about 10% of what print did. But does it have a long tail? Because you put up a digital comic and it's still selling a year later, and DC could still be making money from it then, I suppose. And we don't have that kind of data.
There's that. There's also the Squirrel Girl and
Moon Girl.
Some of the other comics that are kind of directed at the younger and more female market.
Right. So Squirrel Girl maybe sold 10,000 copies or less in the direct market, and then apparently sold a huge amount in sales to elementary school students at book fairs and things like that.
And did better digital, was my understanding as well.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, just some books for certain markets make more sense there. And we don't know which ones because they won't release the numbers, which makes it hard to say that. But I heard for that book in particular, digital sales were better than people were projecting.
But I'm guessing that, I don't know. I can see it both ways. I can see digital kind of be that initial marketplace that because I think part of the huge advantage of the direct market is the customer churn coming in every Wednesday, keeping you interested in what's coming new. In a book situation, I've never, even though I've been a huge book reader all my life, I've never kept up on like what's coming out this week from Ace Science Fiction. I never knew. I would just go in the bookstore every few months and pick out some books that looked interesting. And then I think that the people who do the weekly comics create buzz that passes on to the book market afterwards. So you're kind of missing out on some free marketing in a sense.
Yeah, again, and like I said, it's the C stringers that I think it makes sense for, not your bigger stuff.
Right. So if you can get some buzz from the digital releases, I guess that would work. But I guess I was thinking in terms of digital, that you have a more engaged audience in these more advanced digital, in the digital sense, platforms like that Korean one.
Well, I mean, they have to split the difference. They're not going to be on Webtoons, so...
Maybe they will eventually be on Webtoons. Maybe that would be a way to get a younger audience and then publish it in hard copy for them to double dip and for the older audience to discover it.
Yeah.
But the kinds of comics that my daughter and some of her friends like on Webtoons is very different from the kinds of comics that the people that we know like.
Oh, sure.
Oh, a wider variety of people. It might be closer to manga.
Not anymore.
Well, what are your thoughts? Do you think someone else could fill DC's spot in the comic book market?
I'm kind of wondering if, I think we're going to lose the idea of the big two.
Mm-hmm. I've been wondering about that.
Yeah, but I mean, for that, I think Valiant's going to step up, but I don't think they're just going to replace DC. I think they're going to be more in punching range of, say, Image.
You think it'll be Valiant?
And so we're going... I think they're the one poised to kind of fill more of that space.
See, because with the people that I follow who review comics on YouTube, my sense is of Boom and Vault Comics really taking off. And that those are the ones coming up behind Image, and that Valiant seems fading away.
I see Boom rising. I see Dynamite rising. I see Dark Horse. I think Dark Horse could take some spot, but Dark Horse has to figure out Dark Horse for itself first. Ever since they lost so much of their license to Marvel in a period of 2 years, they didn't really do anything this year to...
Their big non-licensed thing, Hellboy, seems to have, done a very slow fade. It's still out there, but it's not as...
Well, there's BPRD, not Hellboy, right?
I think they release occasional Hellboy miniseries still, like Hellboy 1957, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, outside of Mike Mignola, right? They need...
Black Hammer has been kind of a popular series. But yeah, I'm sure... Then they have Umbrella Academy, which, in fact, just today I went to my comic book store and he said that suddenly Umbrella Academy, he can't keep Umbrella Academy on the shelves. And it used to be he hardly sold any copies. So the TV show made a huge difference.
Right. So, I mean, I guess they have something, but I feel like they need a few currents to build the momentum.
But see, in the people I follow, I don't hear any buzz about Dark Horse Comics, except a little bit about Black Hammer. I hear a lot of buzz about several Boom series. The one I'm following is Once and Future, the retelling of King Arthur. And then too. People are just wild about Something's Killing the Children, which I avoided, but I bought a trade now. And there's a couple other series there that people like a lot. Seven Secrets. So there's a lot of buzz in the hardcore people. I don't know if that means eventually those things will sell really well elsewhere. And there's...
No, I hear you, but did you see what the top 5 selling graphic novels were this year?
No. Are you looking at it at the moment?
I am. So the first is Umbrella Academy Volume 1. Second, Batman Who Laughs. Mm-hmm. Third, are you ready for this? Watchmen.
If only DC had somehow made nice with Alan Moore, think how much more money they would have made. Oh well. Anyway.
Apparently they're doing fine. Ironically, to me, the fourth best-selling, Umbrella Academy Volume 3. Volume 2 is number 7 on the list. That's just weird to me. And then, there's a Teen Titans Raven, which is one of those YA things you were talking about earlier. And then there's the Witcher Animus, which I feel like Witcher comics are published by Dark Horse as well.
But I'm not sure. It might say right there on your list. Often they'll put in parentheses who the publisher is. It
doesn't say who publishes.
Okay, well, Dark Horse is doing better than I thought.
That's the thing, is when I look at sales, like Dark Horse does the Witcher comics.
But I guess, so I'm more going in terms of buzz and thinking that implies what will be selling. If it's getting a lot of buzz now for the hardcore readers, possibly that will be what builds an audience in the future. And so I don't see what Dark Horse is doing right now is building much buzz. The comics that are coming out right now in individual issues.
Well, I think that's kind of my point, is what we think of as being hot is because we're in it. And so what's hot and new is where the buzz is. But the truth is, for a lot of this stuff, it's true for books overall, like what sells are these things that hit a mass point. And having the TV show or the show, like Watchmen had that show recently, which is probably part of the reason why it's on the top 10, is that that's what's pushing a lot of these books. And so it's that cross-media pollination. And so there's a factor of what we're talking about, but the big sales are from people who will never hear about so much of what we're talking about for 2020, because they're only going to read a fraction of the comics that we've heard about.
True, but I mean, things that started with just a lot of buzz in the direct market do become big sellers, like Saga and, well, they're both Brian K. Vaughan books, and Paper Girls.
Sure.
And those are major sellers for my comic shop, and I know they've appeared on those kinds of lists in the past.
They have, and those books will appear on those kinds of lists from time to time. But some of it too is like opportunity. That Watchmen show didn't come out, so Watchmen didn't take over again. Or the Umbrella Academy having 3 volumes, and so that being pushed. And next year, those are going to fade a bit, and some more indie, whatever was big that year might rise to the crop a bit more, right? So there's a bunch of factors to take in, but I feel like when we're talking about marketplace share too, I feel like Dark Horse get hit, but Dark Horse is doing fine. They're just not doing fine for the direct market, but they don't need to care because they have these quality books that keep selling.
All of those, except for The Witcher, came out of the direct market originally. And while League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, not a League of Extraordinary, what's it called? Umbrella Academy, only became big when a TV show happened, it wouldn't have existed without the direct market. And Watchmen came out of the direct market.
Well, Umbrella Academy got a big push initially because it was tied to My Chemical Romance, because of the creator, and so it got more attention than your average indie book.
True, but I still think that the direct market is extremely important wheel in the machine. And if you take that wheel out, you've got a gap.
I think it's of course it is.
So I'm saying that Boom and Vault and some other smaller publishers are stepping up quite a bit in that direct market and becoming an important part of that wheel. And some of their work, maybe if 10 years from now will be like the next, I keep wanting to say League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Umbrella Academy. But I think they're in line.
Maybe
Dark Horse will hold its position.
But I've never seen a Vault comic in any of the shops I can go to.
At first I was just hearing buzz about it, and now my shop, which is a small shop and doesn't carry a lot of stuff, as
in Portland.
Yeah, but it mostly carries Marvel and DC unless I special order it. But now there's carrying quite a bit of Vault. a little bit of Titan, a little bit of Aftershock, but Vault is doing better than those.
Titan has the Doctor Who license, and I don't know what else.
They're odd. They do some translated comics, they do some licensed comics, and then every once in a while they have something original. Like they had a 6-issue miniseries called Adler that was about a female character from a Sherlock Holmes novel.
Yeah.
And they've had other bits and pieces, but that they're a particularly odd thing. So I was kind of shocked that when I can go to one of the bigger shops here in Portland and find everything, but my shop is a tiny shop. An interesting thing, kind of on the other side, like my shop owner is mostly interested in back issues. That's how he got into the business. He had a business where he just went to cons and it was selling really well. So he thought, well, why don't I sell a few more back issues during the year when I'm not at cons? So I'll start this little shop. But he got hardly any business until he started carrying the weekly new comics. And he says people come in every Wednesday and even sometimes don't buy comics or don't buy the new comics, but will buy back issues. But they come in on Wednesday to see what's new, and then they buy other stuff. And so even though he may not, it's a huge hassle for him dealing with Diamond, and he may not be making most of his money from the new comics. The new comics are still driving his business. They're keeping his business going. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, that's different. That's cool.
That's why I thought it was interesting that he started actually carrying Vault comics even when I'm not the one ordering them, because at first it was just Marvel and DC. Anyway, though, I do worry that if DC really backs out of the market, maybe that'll put a number of shops out of business, and then the snowball effect of if there's not enough shops, then the smaller publishers start going out of business.
We'll see. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think they're clearly reducing their line. I wish Marvel would reduce their line a bit. I don't think it's necessarily all that bad.
Because the 90s contraction of the comic book shops pretty much put all the independent publishers except Dark Horse out of business. All the ones that were around before then disappeared.
The market is not the same as that. I think there's a fear of a bit of a bubble, and I think it's sound, but I don't think it would be the same thing anymore, because not everybody's doing the variant covers and the hollow foils and all that. A lot of especially the indie ones of note, like you've been talking about, are making their bones on selling comics. There might be some variant covers, but it's the comics pushing it, right. And then there's like an A and B cover or something. Like I know one we didn't talk about is IDW, but they have a lot of licensed stuff, but like the Turtle stuff, the Transformers stuff, the G.I. Joe stuff for those fans are good comics pushing it. And then, yeah, they get some artists to do variant covers, but there might be covers A through E, but like A and B are the ones you can get on the shelf.
I'm not sure if my point is clear, though. So if the loss of DC makes some shops go out of business because that was 30% of their sales and they work on a slim margin and there's less shops overall, indie comics that also they're like the shops. They're running on a thin margin and they could go under at any time when they have a cash flow problem. They, unlike Marvel,
right,
who, can weather the storm, so to speak. So that's why when the shops collapsed in the 90s, the indie comics companies, not because they had relied on foil, but even ones, very small ones, like Kitchen Sink or something that I could find in most comic book shops in the early 90s, they stopped publishing because when there weren't enough shops, they just couldn't weather the storm and they were gone. And Dark Horse survived because they had all those franchises. But they were the only ones who survived from that period.
I'm willing to continue it, but I gotta
go. Okay. Well, I'll see. Maybe we'll make this a bonus episode or something, or maybe we won't. But I'll talk to you later, Matt.
Okay. All right.